The night it happened, Thomas Grant was supposed to be invisible. That's what Royal Protection Officers are trained for. Stand in the shadows. Blend into the background. Watch everything, but be seen by no one. For 3 years, Thomas had done exactly that at Kensington Palace, guarding one of the most famous families in the world. But on the night of October 12, 2019, everything changed. It was 2:47 in the morning when Thomas heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Metal scraping against stone. His hand moved to his radio automatically, fingers hovering over the button. The palace grounds were supposed to be silent at this hour. Empty. Secure. He moved toward the noise, his footsteps careful on the gravel path. The autumn air was cold enough to see his breath. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked once, then went quiet. Thomas had walked these paths 1,000 times. He knew every gate, every camera angle, every blind spot. That's when he saw the figure. A man dressed in black, scaling the wall near the east wing. Thomas's heart slammed against his ribs. The east wing, where the children slept, where 6-year-old Prince George had his bedroom. Before you hear what happened next, if you love true stories that reveal the hidden sacrifices people make, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe where this story goes. Thomas didn't hesitate. He broke into a run, his radio already at his mouth, calling for backup. But the intruder was fast, too fast. By the time Thomas reached the wall, the man had already dropped into the garden below. Thomas vaulted over the wall without thinking. His training took over. His body moved on instinct. He could hear the crunch of footsteps ahead running toward the palace, toward the windows, toward the rooms where the children dreamed, safe and unaware. The intruder reached the building first. Thomas saw him try the ground floor window, locked. Then another, also locked. But the man kept moving, testing each one with a determination that sent ice through Thomas's veins. This wasn't some random trespasser. This was planned. When the intruder's hand found an unlocked window and began to push it open, Thomas launched himself forward. He grabbed the man's shoulder and yanked him backward. They crashed onto the garden path together, a tangle of limbs and desperate strength. The fight was brutal and silent. The intruder was bigger than Thomas, heavier, but Thomas had everything to lose. In his mind, he could see Prince George's face, the little boy who sometimes waved at him from the window, the child who once asked him if being a guard was scary. Thomas's fist connected with the man's jaw. Once, twice. The intruder swung back, catching Thomas across the temple. Stars exploded in his vision, but he didn't let go. He couldn't let go. Then he heard it. Footsteps. Voices' backup was coming. The intruder heard it too. With a desperate surge of strength, he shoved Thomas off and scrambled to his feet. He didn't try for the window again. Instead, he ran. Thomas struggled up, dizzy, tasting blood. But his legs wouldn't cooperate fast enough by the time the other guards reached him. The intruder had vanished into the darkness beyond the walls. Thomas sat on the cold ground, breathing hard, his hands shaking. He'd stopped him. The children were safe. Prince George was safe. He thought that was the end of it. He had no idea his life was about to disappear. The meeting happened 3 days later. Thomas had been told to report to an office he'd never entered before. It was deep inside the palace, down corridors he rarely walked. No windows, just dark wood paneling and the smell of old books. 2 men in suits were waiting for him. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't shake his hand. They just gestured for him to sit. "You did well," the first man said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "You protected the family." Thomas nodded. His temple still ached from where the intruder had hit him. The bruise had turned a deep purple. "Just doing my job, sir. About that." The second man slid a folder across the desk. "We need to talk about what happens next." Thomas opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Crime scene photos, he realized. A body. His stomach turned cold. The intruder. Dead. Found in a parking garage 2 miles from the palace. Single gunshot wound to the chest. "We caught him?" Thomas asked, though the question felt wrong the moment it left his mouth. He was found, the first man corrected. 12 hours after the incident, Thomas stared at the photo. The man's face was pale, his eyes open and empty. Thomas had fought this man, had felt the weight of him, the strength in his arms. Now he was gone. Do we know who he was? The silence that followed was heavy, deliberate. His name was Viktor Petrov. The second man finally said, Russian national, former military? He had connections to some very dangerous people. Thomas's mind raced. Why would someone like that come after Prince George? That's the question we can't afford to have answered publicly. The first man leaned forward. Which brings us to you. The room felt smaller suddenly, colder. The family is grateful, the man continued. More than you know, but this incident can never become public knowledge. If the media learns that someone got that close, that someone like Petrov targeted the prince, the security implications would be catastrophic. Thomas understood security. He understood protecting the family. But something about this conversation felt wrong. What are you asking me to do? We're asking you to disappear. The words hung in the air like smoke. Thomas stared at them, these two men in their expensive suits, their faces carved from stone. Excuse me? Not literally, the second man said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But you can't stay in the Royal Protection Command. You can't stay in London. Your involvement in this incident needs to be erased. Thomas felt his hands grip the arms of the chair. I stopped an attack on a child. On the future king. And you want me to just vanish? We want to protect you, the first man said. Petrov had associates. They may know you stopped him. They may come looking for revenge. We're offering you a way out, a new identity, a new life. Somewhere safe. Witness protection? Thomas's voice came out hollow. Something like that. Thomas thought of his apartment in South London, his sister who lived in Manchester, his niece who was starting school next month. His whole life was here. His career, his purpose. And if I say no? The men exchanged a glance. The first one spoke carefully. Then we can't guarantee your safety, or the safety of those close to you. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But it wasn't a choice either. Thomas looked down at the photo again. Viktor Petrov. Dead in a parking garage. Shot by someone, somewhere, for some reason no one would explain. How long do I have to decide? You're being reassigned tonight, the second man said. To a protection detail in Scotland. Remote. Secure. You'll stay there while we make arrangements. Tonight. Pack light. Someone will collect you at 8. Thomas walked out of that office in a daze. By nightfall, he was on a train heading north, watching London disappear behind him. He tried calling his sister. The number rang and rang. No answer. He left a message. Told her he loved her. Told her he'd be out of touch for a while. He didn't know it would be the last. Time he'd hear her voice for 3 years. The house in Scotland was more like a prison. It sat on the edge of a cliff. Miles from the nearest village, gray stone walls, narrow windows. The North Sea crashed against the rocks below, constant and angry. Thomas was told he was protecting a vacant property, a royal estate that needed security during renovation, but there was no renovation. No workers. No one. Just Thomas, the wind, and the sea. The first week, he told himself it was temporary. They'd sort out the situation. He'd be back in London soon. Back to his life. His sister still wasn't answering her phone. He tried emailing. Nothing came back. The second week, he started to understand. He wasn't being protected. He was being buried. A new guard arrived on a rainy Tuesday. His name was Malcolm, a quiet Scotsman with gray hair and tired eyes. He didn't ask Thomas any questions. Didn't want to know his story. That's when Thomas realized Malcolm knew exactly what this place was. A waiting room for people who couldn't exist anymore. How long have you been doing this? Thomas asked one night. They were sitting in the kitchen, drinking tea while rain hammered the windows. Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. This posting? 6 months. Before that, I was in Belfast. Before that, Gibraltar. How long total? 8 years. 8 years. The number hit Thomas like a punch. What did you do? To end up here. Malcolm's smile was sad. Saw something I shouldn't have. Asked questions I shouldn't have asked. He sipped his tea. The crown protects itself, son. Sometimes that means protecting people. Sometimes that means making them disappear. Thomas felt his chest tighten. I saved a child's life. I know. And somewhere in London, that child is safe because of you. His parents sleep at night because of you. But the world can't know there was ever a danger. Can't know the system failed even for a moment. So we just hide? Forever? Malcolm shook his head. They'll move you eventually. New identity. New country, probably. Australia, maybe. Canada. Somewhere you can start over. Without my family? Without my name? That's the price. Malcolm stood, rinsing his cup in the sink. Some people call it sacrifice. Others call it betrayal. Depends on the day. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He stood at the window, watching the lighthouse beams sweep across the water. In his pocket was a letter. It had arrived that afternoon, delivered by courier. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. His sister. His niece. Walking together in a park, smiling. On the back, someone had written 3 words in neat handwriting. They are safe. The message was clear. A reminder. Or a warning. Thomas thought about running. Just walking out the door and disappearing for real on his own terms. But where would he go? The people who'd moved him here had resources he couldn't imagine. Reach he couldn't escape. And if they wanted to find his sister, they could. 3 months passed like a blur of gray skies and cold rooms. Thomas's phone stopped working. The battery died. And when he asked for a charger, Malcolm told him there wasn't one. Thomas suspected it wasn't an accident. His connection to his old life was being severed, piece by piece. Then, on a February morning, a car arrived. Black, expensive. The same kind of car that had taken him from London. The same 2 men in suits stepped out. Thomas met them at the door, his heart pounding. Is it time? There's been a development, the first man said. His face gave nothing away. We need you to come with us. Where? London. There's someone who wants to meet you. Thomas felt hope flare in his chest. Maybe this nightmare was ending. Maybe he was going home. Malcolm watched from the kitchen doorway as Thomas grabbed his jacket. Their eyes met. Malcolm's expression was grim. He didn't say goodbye. The drive back to London took 10 hours. The men didn't speak to Thomas. Didn't answer his questions. Just drove in silence, while the Scottish countryside gave way to English motorways. When they finally stopped, it wasn't at the palace. It wasn't at the security headquarters. It was at a private airfield outside the city. A small plane waited on the tarmac, engines already running. Where are we going? Thomas demanded, his voice rising. The second man finally looked at him. Really looked at him. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can help us finish this. Finish what? Viktor Petrov had a brother, and he's been asking questions about who killed Viktor. He's been following the investigation, and he's getting close to the truth. Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. What truth? That we eliminated Viktor after the palace incident. That it wasn't some random gang killing. That the British government was involved. The words were ice in Thomas's veins. You killed him? We protected the crown. Now we need to protect you. Petrov's brother won't stop until he has revenge. And he's very, very good at finding people. Thomas looked at the plane. At the men. At the future they were offering him. A future without his name. Without his country. Without anything that made him who he was. All because he'd done the right thing. The plane landed in Toronto just before dawn. Thomas had a new passport in his pocket. A new name. Daniel Cooper. Born in Manchester? Immigration consultant. The legend was thin, barely real. But the documents looked genuine enough. They put him in a basement apartment in a suburb called Scarborough. The kind of place where no one asks questions. Where people came to disappear into normal life. You'll receive a stipend, the first man explained before leaving. Enough to live on. Don't draw attention. Don't contact anyone from your old life. In 6 months, we'll review the situation. Then they were gone. Thomas, now Daniel, sat in the empty apartment and tried to process what his life had become. 4 months ago, he'd been protecting royalty. Now, he was nobody in a country he'd never wanted to visit, living a lie. He got a job washing dishes at a diner. The owner didn't care about his past. Paid him cash. Thomas worked nights, slept during the day, and tried not to think about London. But every night, he thought about Prince George. Wondered if the boy remembered that October night. Wondered if anyone had told him how close the danger had come. Probably not. Children should feel safe. That's what Thomas had fought for. The months crawled by. Winter turned to spring. Thomas learned the rhythm of his new life. Learned to answer to Daniel. Learned to smile and nod when his coworkers talked about hockey and complained about traffic. But inside, he was drowning then. One morning in May, everything shattered. Thomas was walking home from his shift when he noticed the car. Black sedan. Tinted windows. It had been parked across from the diner when he'd arrived for work. Now it was 3 blocks behind him. His training kicked in. He turned down a side street. Watched in a shop window's reflection. The car turned a dot. His heart began to race. He thought about running. But running would confirm he was worth chasing. Instead, he walked into a coffee shop, ordered a drink, and sat where he could watch the door. The car parked outside. Thomas pulled out his phone. The number they'd given him for emergencies. He'd never used it. Part of him wondered if it would even work. It rang twice. Daniel Cooper, a voice said. Not a question. A statement. There's a car following me. Shh. We know. Stay where you are. Don't leave the coffee shop. The line went dead. Thomas sat frozen, his coffee growing cold in his hands. Through the window, he watched the black car, watched the shadows inside. Whoever was in there was patient, professional. 20 minutes later, 2 men in casual clothes entered the coffee shop. They sat at a table near the door. One of them caught Thomas's eye and gave a tiny nod. Protection or prison guards? Thomas couldn't tell anymore. An hour passed. Then 2. The black car finally pulled away. The 2 men followed shortly after, leaving without a word. That night, the first man called, the one from London. From the palace meetings, Petrov's brother found you, he said simply. How? He's FSB, former Russian intelligence. He has resources. We underestimated him. A pause. We're moving you again. Where? Thomas's voice came out defeated. New Zealand. Small town. Different identity. We'll set it up properly this time. How many times? Thomas asked. How many times will I have to run? As many as it takes to keep you alive. Maybe I don't want to keep running. Maybe I want to face him. Explain what happened? It's not an option. He doesn't want an explanation. He wants blood. His brother is dead because of you. His brother tried to hurt a child. We both know that's not why Viktor Petrov died. The man's voice was cold. He died because he failed his mission and became a liability. You just happened to be there, but his brother doesn't know that. His brother thinks you're a murderer, and he won't stop until you're dead. Thomas felt the walls closing in. What if I go to the media? Tell them everything. The silence on the line was absolute. When the man spoke again, his voice was ice. Then you become a threat to national security. And we handle threats very differently than we handle assets. Do you understand? Thomas understood. He was trapped. A pawn in a game he'd never wanted to play. The flight leaves tomorrow. Be ready. But Thomas didn't go to New Zealand. That night, he walked to the harbor, stood at the edge of the water and looked at the lights reflecting on the dark surface. He thought about jumping. Just ending it. They're running. The fear, the loneliness. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We can help. If you're ready to fight back. Thomas stared at the message. Another player, another agenda, another group that wanted to use him, but maybe that was his only option. To stop running and start fighting. To take control of his own life, whatever the cost. He typed one word. How? The response came immediately. Meet us. Tomorrow. King Street subway station. Noon. Come alone. Thomas looked at the water one more time. Then he turned away. He had 24 hours to decide if he was brave enough to stop being a victim. 20-4 hours to decide if he was willing to risk everything for a chance at the truth. Thomas arrived at King Street Station 15 minutes early. He'd spent the night watching his apartment door, jumping at every sound. The people who'd sent the message could be anyone. Russian intelligence, journalists, another government agency, or a trap. But anything was better than running forever. He positioned himself near the platform, exit where he could see everyone coming and going. Commuters rushed past, lost in their phones and morning coffee. No one looked at him. No one cared about the man in the worn jacket who was about to make a choice that could get him killed. At exactly noon, a woman approached him. She was younger than he expected. Early 30s, maybe? Dark hair pulled back. Sharp eyes that scanned the station with the same trained awareness he recognized in himself. Former military, he thought. Or current Daniel Cooper, she asked quietly. He nodded. Walk with me. They moved through the station, up to street level, then down a quiet side street. She didn't speak until they were alone. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm with a private security firm that specializes in protecting high-value assets from state-level threats. We've been tracking the Petrov situation. Why? Because we believe you're in danger from both sides? The Russians want revenge. The British want you silent. You're a liability everyone wants to eliminate. Thomas felt his jaw tighten. So you want to use me too? No. We want to offer you a third option. A way out that doesn't involve running or dying. I'm listening. Sarah pulled out a tablet, showed him a photograph. A man in his 40s. Cold eyes, hard face. This is Dmitry Petrov, Victor's brother. FSB officer. He's been hunting you for 6 months. He's in Toronto right now. Thomas's blood ran cold. How do you know? We have sources inside Russian intelligence. Petrov requested operational clearance to conduct a retrieval in Canada. That's FSB speak for assassination, and the British government. They want Petrov gone as much as they want you gone. You're both witnesses to their extrajudicial killing of Victor. If Petrov gets you, problem solved. If you both disappear, even better. Thomas leaned against the brick wall, his mind racing. What's your offer? We approach Petrov. Arrange a meeting between you two. But on our terms. In a controlled environment. You tell him the truth about what happened that night? About how the British government killed his brother. About how you were just doing your job? He'll kill me. Not if we convince him that killing you serves the British government's interests. Not if we show him the real enemy. Thomas stared at her. You want to turn a Russian intelligence officer against the British crown? We want to give you both the truth. What he does with it is his choice. What you do with it is yours. But right now, you're both pawns. We're offering you a chance to become players. Insane. Dangerous, probably. Suicidal. But it was also the first time in 6 months anyone had. Offered Thomas a choice that didn't involve hiding. Why are you helping me? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Because I know what it's like to be burned by the people you served. I was MI6. I uncovered corruption. I reported it through proper channels. 3 weeks later, I had a car accident that wasn't an accident. I survived. My partner didn't. She pulled back her sleeve. A scar ran from her wrist to her elbow. The system protects itself. Always. People like us are expendable. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it. Thomas thought about Prince George. About that night in the garden. About doing the right thing and losing everything because of it. When do we meet Petrov? Tonight, 9 p.m. Abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. We've already sent him your location. He'll come. How do you know? Because revenge is all he has left. His brother was his only family. The British government took that from him. He won't pass up the chance to face the man he blames. Thomas had 8 hours to prepare. 8 hours to decide what he'd say to a trained killer who wanted him dead. 8 hours to pray Sarah's plan would work. He went back to his apartment and wrote a letter. To his sister. Told her he loved her. Told her he was sorry for disappearing. Told her that whatever she heard, he'd done the right thing. He left it on the table where someone would find it. Then he went to meet a dead man's brother. The warehouse was exactly what he expected. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, the smell of rust and decay. Sarah's team had set up lights in the center, 2 chairs facing each other, like an interrogation room, but without the table. Thomas sat in one chair at 9:03 p.m. Dmitry Petrov walked through the door. He was bigger than Victor had been. Broader shoulders. Harder eyes. He moved like a predator, scanning for threats, for exits, for weakness. His gaze locked on Thomas, Petrov said in heavily accented English. His voice was rough, full of gravel and pain. You killed my brother. Thomas met his eyes. Didn't look away. No, I stopped your brother from hurting a child. The British government killed him. Shot him in a parking garage and called it gang violence. Petrov's jaw clenched. Lies, I can prove it. Sarah stepped forward, holding another tablet. We have the autopsy report. The real one. Not the one released to the press. The bullet came from a British government tissue weapon. The crime scene was staged. Your brother was executed. She handed Petrov the tablet. Thomas watched him read. Watched the realization dawn in his eyes. Watched fury replace confusion. Why? Petrov's voice cracked. Why kill him? Because he failed, Thomas said quietly. Because he got caught. Because dead he couldn't talk about who sent him or why. Petrov looked up, his eyes wet with rage. Who sent him? That, Sarah said, is what we're going to find out. Together. The alliance was fragile, built on shared rage and mutual betrayal. Dmitry Petrov didn't trust Thomas. Thomas didn't trust Petrov. But they both trusted Sarah's evidence. The autopsy report was damning. The ballistics analysis, more so. Viktor Petrov had been killed by someone with government access and professional training. The question was why. Sarah's team spent 3 weeks digging. They traced Victor's movements in the weeks before the palace incident. Bank records. Phone logs. Travel history. What they found changed everything. Victor hadn't been working alone. He'd received payments from a shell corporation in Cyprus. The same corporation had ties to a private security firm based in London. The same firm that employed former MI6 officers. The same firm that had consulted for the Royal Protection Command. It was an inside job. Someone wanted to create a security incident, Sarah explained, laying out documents across the warehouse table. They hired Victor to breach palace security. Not to harm Prince George, but to expose the weaknesses in the system. Why? Thomas asked, though dread was already forming in his chest. Government contracts. The firm that hired Victor was bidding to overhaul royal security. A successful breach would prove the current system was inadequate. They'd win the contract. Worth hundreds of millions. Dmitry slammed his fist on the table. My brother was set up, used as a tool, and then eliminated when he failed, Sarah confirmed. He was never meant to succeed, just to get close enough to cause panic. When Thomas stopped him, the firm had to clean up. Your brother became a liability. Thomas felt sick. So I saved Prince George from a staged attack. You saved him from a real danger that should never have existed. Victor thought he was conducting reconnaissance. But his handlers knew he'd be caught. The question is, did the people who killed him work for the firm, or for the government agencies trying to protect the firm? The answer came 2 days later, delivered by an encrypted message to Sarah's secure server. Intelligence from her sources inside MI6. A classified memo approving the neutralization of Viktor Petrov. Signed by someone high up in the security apparatus, someone who'd covered their tracks well, but not perfectly. We have a choice, Sarah said, looking at both men. We can leak this. Destroy the firm. Expose the corruption. It'll be the biggest scandal to hit the royal family in decades. Or, Thomas asked, or we use it as leverage. Negotiate your freedom. Both of you. You get your life back, Thomas. Dmitri gets closure and immunity. The firm goes down quietly. The crown saves face. Dmitri shook his head. My brother deserves justice. Public justice. Your brother was a criminal who took a job trying to breach a child's bedroom, Thomas said quietly. I'm sorry he was used. I'm sorry he was killed. But going public doesn't bring him back. It just destroys more lives. Easy for you to say. You still have family. Family I haven't spoken to in 8 months. A sister who thinks I abandoned her. A niece who probably doesn't remember my face. Thomas's voice broke. We've all lost something. The question is whether we want revenge or peace. The silence stretched long. Finally, Dmitri spoke. What would this leverage get us? Sarah outlined the plan. They'd approach the government with the evidence. Offer a quiet resolution. The firm would lose its contracts. The officials involved would retire quietly. No scandal, no headlines. In exchange, Thomas would get his identity back. His record cleared. Compensation for the months of exile, Dmitri would get immunity and relocation to a country of his choice. No FSB retaliation. No British prosecution, they'll agree? Thomas asked. They don't have a choice. If this goes public, it's worse than Diana. Worse than Andrew. It proves the royal family's security was compromised from the inside. That a child was used as bait for a government contract. They'll pay anything to bury this. It took 6 weeks to negotiate. 6 weeks of tense meetings in neutral locations. Lawyers and handlers and government officials who never gave their real names. But eventually, papers were signed. Agreements were made. On a cold November morning, Thomas Grant walked back into London. Not as Daniel Cooper. Not as a ghost. As himself, his sister was waiting at the airport. She saw him and burst into tears, running across the terminal to throw her arms around him. His niece, taller now, more grown up, hugged his legs and asked where he'd been. Away, he told her. But I'm home now. The government gave him a settlement. Enough to never work again if he chose. They gave him a new position too if he wanted it. Training officer for protection detail. Desk work, safe, quiet. He turned it down. Instead, he joined Sarah's firm. The one that specialized in protecting people from the systems that were supposed to protect them. He'd spent years serving the crown. Now he'd serve the people the crown forgot. Dmitri Petrov moved to Argentina. Thomas received one email from him 6 months later. 3 words, thank you, brother. Thomas never replied. Some alliances were meant to end when their purpose was served, but on quiet nights. Thomas still thought about that October evening, about the sound of someone climbing the wall, about the choice to run toward danger instead of away. He'd saved a child's life. That truth remained, regardless of the corruption that surrounded it. Prince George was safe, still smiling in photos, still waving at crowds, still unaware of how close the darkness had come. That was enough. Thomas had disappeared to protect a secret. But he'd come back to reclaim something more important. His name, his truth, his choice to keep fighting for what mattered. Some guards stand in the shadows to protect power. Others step into the light to protect people. Thomas Grant finally knew which kind he wanted to be, and he was never going to disappear again.